Hey guys, welcome to Nerdarchy, for nerds by nerds. I'm Nerdarchist Ted. Today I'm joined by
Nerdarchist Dave.
And today we're going to talk about 3 ways to use weather in your Dungeons & Dragons game. Hey guys, jump down to the description below where you can sign up for Nerdarchy, the newsletter. It's a great way to get gaming tips as well as learn how to game with us.
So recently we were inspired while traveling and going on vacation / work for Nerdarchy. We went on the fantasy cruise where we experienced a lot of different weather conditions out at sea, as well as on our way to the cruise itself as well.
Mm-hmm.
So for that, you can actually refer to I believe it's 109 and 110 in your Dungeon Master's Guide, and that's just going to give you generic rules for weather. 118 to 119 is going to give you weather at sea for reference if you want to look in there.
Dungeon Master's Guide,
But it definitely gave us a bunch of thoughts as far as how this would impact you if you were actually on an adventure.
But mechanically, the DMG offers some things, but there's a big difference between what the rules say specific to certain things and what you encounter in real life and how you could easily adapt to that. So we're not going to go over any of the rules in here. You've got your own DMG at home. You can go check that out. We're going to just speculate on the things that we saw and kind of went through and how we would want to use that in our games.
Yeah, essentially there's basically 3 ways to use the weather in your game. So we'll run through them, and I guess we'll start with the very first one, and just weather as narration, right? It just links the players and the characters to your world. It makes it feel more real. And the reason that really brought this home was the last night on the cruise ship, the sea was a bit rough. There was a lot of wind, and now, we don't actually know how tall the waves were, but we know it was rougher than the day before. And the day before, I heard the captain call out on the intercom to expect 10 to 20 foot waves. So it must have been higher. They must have been bigger than that.
Right. Now, we're on a cruise ship. We're talking, I believe our ship had 13 decks. Or was it more than that?
It was 13 decks. A mighty vessel. The brilliance of the sea.
Indeed. Now, when we're up on deck, we're on like the 11th floor, 12th floor, and that's when we're actually out in the open air and being able to do something. So on average, you're talking over 100 foot off the top of the wave or the top of the ocean. So like it ain't getting to us.
Right, and it was dark out. It was night, right. So you can actually say that well. But, it really set the atmosphere, because here's some of the things that are going on, regardless of whether you're talking game mechanics or not, just like for narration. Like we were going to play mini golf in this windstorm, right? So we're walking against it. Ted's wearing his pirate coat, and it's all billowed out, and he's definitely in danger of becoming a kite. In the meantime, my wife and my daughter are trying to push against the wind, and it's a little tough. And then there's a third element that's going on. Off in the distance, there's lightning storms. There's storms going on. You see flashes of lightning lighting the sky.
Now, remind you, the wind is whipping, so sound is not going to travel as easily. But usually, when you see lightning, if it's close enough to actually be of any kind of worry, you're going to hear it. Well,
yeah, you would be accompanied by thunder. There was no thunder.
There was nothing. It was way out there, and your daughter was like, "We're gonna die."
You were on a metal ship, heading to go play mini golf with metal clubs.
So, but it was cool because you don't usually get to see the flashes and the light and really just sit and enjoy it. And I thought that part was cool.
It was, and so for your game, it's foreshadowing, right? The storms off in the distance. But in D&D, a storm doesn't have to be a storm, right? It could be storm giants having a competition, where they throw and catch lightning bolts. Even though your players just think it's a weather phenomenon, or the whole storm could actually be a foreshadowing for an attack of a kraken that has the ability to control the weather. Because what better way to launch an attack on a vessel than first disorient and blind its crew?
It could be 2 mages having a mage competition or duel, and they might not be directing the energies at each other, but they could be using some other kind of magical measurement to see whose magic is better.
Exactly. And now on the way there, I flew in, but Ted drove in. I believe the morning of the cruise or the morning before was extremely foggy.
Oh yeah.
And where we were staying in Tampa, within a couple hours the fog burned off, no problem whatsoever after we gotten up. But Ted had a little bit of a different experience.
We had to get up at like 4 o'clock in the morning, somewhere in that neighborhood, and drive from South Carolina to Tampa. We were looking at 6 to 7 hours of driving, and our plan was to try and be in Tampa at noon. So we had to go, and my traveling companions are not just let's just get in the car and go. You got to stop, you got to stretch, you got bathroom breaks, food breaks, whatever have you. But there was an area where
Were you traveling with hobbits per chance?
No.
We need second breakfasts.
But foodies they were. Now, as we're traveling on the highway, there's a lot of cars traveling, and they can make the fog move. But off to the sides of the road, there's forest and land and what have you, that there's not cars traveling at 60 plus miles an hour, and therefore the fog is kind of static. And there's times that I look and I'm like, that tree has got to be 15 to 20 feet tall, and you can barely see the tip of it, and the fog has sunk all the way to the bottom of the ground. So if you were walking in that, you wouldn't be able to see anything. And I was just like, that really makes me wonder, how could I use that in a game? Because I know, like, whether you're in a car or on foot, if you try to illuminate the fog, it just reflects back at you. So you're just going to get more blind. So when you've got complete invisibility to everything around you, travel and combat, I don't want to say impossible, but it can be dangerous.
Well, we're going to get to those parts later. But just from the narration standpoint, you start talking about fog and visibility. You're going to increase. It's going to increase the chances of the players having to worry about being lost. Obviously, you mentioned fog in any tabletop role playing game of Dungeons and Dragons, you're going to be like, oh my God, it's Ravenloft. So there's that bit of trauma that goes well along with it as well for those of you who played in Ravenloft.
Indeed.
But moving forward into the other uses for it, it could also make for great skill challenges. Not just the fog, but weather in general. You're trying to accomplish things, you're trying to get things done. Well, you have this other level of difficulty. And we like pointing, when we talk skill challenges, we really do like pointing out Matt Colville, because he did such a phenomenal job on his 4th edition skill challenge video. If I remember, I'll put it in the description. If not, go find out Matt Colville and check it out. If you do a channel search on his channel, skill challenges, that should come up. But it's fantastic, and it's a great way to add tension to your game, and for your players to have their characters use other skills that aren't purely combat related.
You could have the survival checks, the nature checks, and every time you're trying to do something, you could you have to combat nature itself to get through what you're doing. If you have the rain pouring down and you have fog, it could definitely make you weary. So it could actually invoke wisdom saving throws or con saving throws to actually push on or stave off exhaustion.
Yeah, it's definitely gonna slow you down. Like you said, you could get lost. So you could use acrobatics, athletics, knowledge, nature. I guess it's nature now. The survival skill, and then perhaps perception or insight. Anything depending on how well your players come up with rationales for using different skills to invoke the skill challenge. You could definitely do something with that. It could be interesting. But then when you move into the out of exploration and into the combat phase of the game, that's when the stuff is really going to be a problem. Heavy winds could cause difficult terrain if you're moving against the wind. If you're moving with the wind, you might have to make athletics checks
just to stop when you want.
Yeah, it's just to have controlled movement. Rain and fog are going to decrease visibility, so it may offer concealment and not cover. It would be concealment to your adversaries, and also it blocks off line of sight. One of the things about the heavy winds too may also cause a disadvantage for shooting ranged weapons.
Yep.
It's going to be hard to be precise.
I would say that anything involving wind, thrown weapons, throwing a dagger, throwing an axe, that kind of stuff is automatically going to be with disadvantage. But like ranged weapons, you could wind up halving their distances
If they're shooting against the
Right.
wind, yeah, absolutely. And then even if you're shooting with the wind, it's still gonna fail your aim, I would think. So so that would be justification for a disadvantage
Right.
as well. So there's definitely those things. One of the things we noticed from being on the ship when the windstorm was going on and the water was rough, is it definitely affected your ability to move around. Not so much that you're like falling over, but definitely there's a couple times you're walking and you stumble 3 steps in to the right or the left that you hadn't intended to just because of the way the ship pitched.
Now, our ship was massive. Now, imagine if you're doing any of this stuff at sea with a normal-sized fantasy vessel.
Yes.
So, like, unless you've got some kind of magic ship that kind of offers some kind of counterbalancing factor, like, you could have some serious issues just walking. And, if you've got a sailor background, you might know, okay, we're in pitch situations. I'm going to tie myself off so that I don't fall, overboard.
Well, that's another thing too. Like, in that instance, you might want to reward the sailor background with giving them lower DCs or advantage on certain checks, just because they're used to life on the sea. You could, like, I don't know if this is factual at all, but sailors are often like depicted barefoot. So perhaps there's a reason for that. Maybe that gives them better grip on the deck or whatever.
They just couldn't afford shoes.
Yeah, maybe. Your steadfast companion is always, you've always seen his feet shod, but all of a sudden you're on a ship and he's running around barefoot. Why is he doing that? Like, so there could be little interesting things like that going on.
Getting into the combat, fog tends to do what it's going to do. So there's nothing to say that you couldn't have fog that starts like, at the waist or mid chest, and therefore the creatures who are only 2 or 3 foot tall can walk right underneath of it and not have any problems. So they could be rolling with standard or with advantage, whereas you are rolling with disadvantage because you're having a hard time seeing them. So like that's one way to really be able to muck with players as well with fog.
Yeah, with the ground cover. Yeah, depending, like if it's something that doesn't rely wholly on its sight to see, or within 5 foot, you're probably okay to attack something just next to you. Now the other thing I was thinking with the pitching and yelling deck, during combat, that might require athletics checks, to move around and not end up on your ass.
Oh yeah.
Especially, if the ship is, pitching and yawing more than the one we were on. And and granted, we were just walking. We weren't dodging sword and axe blows and trying to land attacks of our own. We were just moving around. So, so that's going to create a much different set of circumstances than the ones we were facing. And again, on those checks, you might want to give your sailor background characters a lower DC or advantage on the check to denote, well, this is how they spent a good portion of their life.
Yep.
So the question is, in your games, how do you use weather to enhance the gameplay? Let us know in the comments below. While you're at it, like, share, and subscribe.
You can patronize us in a good way over on Patreon.
So until next time,
Stay nerdy.
3 ways to use the weather in your game. So we'll run through them, and I guess we'll start with the very first one, and just weather as narration, right? It just links the players and the characters to your world. It makes it feel more real. And the reason that really brought this home was the last night on the cruise ship, the sea was a bit rough. There was a lot of wind, and now we don't actually know how tall the waves were, but we know it was rougher than the day before.
Hey guys, welcome to Nerdarchy, for nerds by nerds. I'm Nerdarchist Ted. Today I'm joined by
Nerdarchist Dave.
And today we're going to talk about 3 ways to use weather in your Dungeons & Dragons game. Hey guys, jump down to the description below where you can sign up for Nerdarchy, the newsletter. It's a great way to get gaming tips as well as learn how to game with us.
So recently we were inspired while traveling and going on vacation / work for Nerdarchy. We went on the fantasy cruise where we experienced a lot. And the day before, I heard the captain call out on the intercom to expect 10 to 20 foot waves. So it must have been higher. They must have been bigger than that.
Right. Now, we're on a cruise ship. We're talking, I believe our ship had 13 decks. Or
Yes.
was it more than that?
It was 13 decks. A mighty
So-
vessel, the brilliance
so-
of the sea.
Indeed. Now, when we're up on deck, we're on like the 11th floor, 12th floor, and that's when we're actually out in the open air and being able to do something. So,
A lot of different weather conditions out at sea, as well as on our way to the cruise itself as well. So for that, you can actually refer to I believe it's 109 and 110 in your Dungeon Master's Guide, and that's just going to give you generic rules for weather. 118 to 119 is going to give you weather at sea for reference if you want to look in there.
Dungeon Master's Guide.
But it definitely gave us a bunch of thoughts as far as how this would impact you if you were actually on an adventure.
But mechanically, the DMG offers some things, but there's a big difference between what the rules say specific to certain things and what you encounter in real life and how you could easily adapt to that. So we're not going to go over any of the rules in here. You've got your own DMG at home. You can go check that out. We're going to just speculate on the things that we saw and kind of went through and how we would want to use that in our games.
Yeah, essentially there's basically